lectures or sermons with the imams, and because many of them didn't know how to read, at one point in the Islamic world it was like 80% or 90% literacy rate. That's changed maybe since then. But they would get these cassettes, and they would hear these messages that somebody interpreted for them. Now it could be an imam, and what if he just reads the negative passages about another people and he doesn't read the positive ones? How are these people who do not know how to read the book? What are they going to get out of it? It's when you talk to a Muslim, when you talk to a Jewish person, you're not only talking about their book, you're talking about who taught them that book. You're talking about the rabbi, you're talking about their neighbors, you're talking about the teacher at school. And it could be a broken telephone, and it could be a big misunderstanding. And that's why I'm thinking there's so many problems between the different faiths because of all these misunderstandings.
Like there, everybody knows. Like most of the people know about Islam. That there are five pillars in Islam. They pray 5 times a day. Even like people kind of misrepresent Islam. The way I read it, I got like there is a verse in the Quran that says, "Don't go close to prayer." Like don't say prayer, but people kind of misrepresent it. They don't say the full verse. The full verse is, don't go to prayer or don't say the prayer when you are drunk. So when you know about the context and about the kind of like explanation, then you'll be able to know whatever is being said in a verse or in a chapter. But if you don't know about that, you you're gonna go astray, or you'll never know what's being said in the book.
Right. So one has to read thoroughly, and one has to know the context and so on. Yeah, I get it. Are you a
Like
believer?
I'd say, Ethan, I'm like I'd say I'm an agnostic. I do believe there is a God, but I don't know which one is. But to me, Islam makes a bit more sense than the other religions. That's why I'm like right now I'm giving references and
So you're saying Islam, from, even though you're agnostic, but if you had to adhere to one religion, you're saying Islam is the one that seems most realistic to you?
I'm still searching. I don't believe in one God or something like that, but I'm still searching. I don't know which one to believe in, but
Right. What was it that appealed to you about Islam?
like the way these scholars on YouTube and who are knowing like those people, the way they're represented and the level of patience they have. So it hands up, tells a lot.
Well, if you can put some of those names in the chat, I'd like to look them up and kind of watch them and see what you see in them. So I'm open for recommendations.
Well, I would love to.
One of the most beautiful versions I heard of the afterlife, and was actually, and I don't subscribe to any religion as such at all, so I'm totally agnostic, or actually I'm atheistic on the subject. But it said something like heaven and hell are the same place, and it's a place where there's a lot of spirituality going on. Only that the righteous love this place, and it's heaven for them, and the wicked they hate it, and it's hell for them. And I think that's interesting. I think I can't explain what philosophical street that reminds me of. But there's
Hey,
something
Tom, if
really.
you want to take a quick second. Dr. Rita, I have tried to bring you up also. Do you want to leave and come back and see if we can bring you up? Go on, Tom. Thank you.
Going back to that concept of neurolinguistic programming, and you see people who join cults and why they joined a cult or why they stayed in a cult. There's a documentary called The Source Family in the late 1960s. There was a hippie cult. Basically, they were like black Hebrew Israelites, but it's a fascinating look into the New Age spiritual movement, and I just don't get the feeling that there's many hippies in the Islamist movement. They all seem to be militaristic, extremely all or nothing. There's no compromise. What it says is the truth, that their opinion has no flexibility. So, if you think that's strength, I think you're mistaken. I think strength is actually flexibility, or the ability to take in a large amount of information, sift through what is useless, and take out the meat and potatoes and utilize that information for positive growth. And I think a lot of this is just an educational problem. We're operating off of very complex databases, and if Judaism or if Hebrew created the universe off of a database of 22 letters, we're dealing with individuals that haven't taken in the whole corpus of or the body of information to readjust their their perspectives. And I think Judaism and Christianity, because of the esoteric element within those religions, gives them that flexibility to compromise, to have strength, to have courage. But I could be wrong, but if I were to go to Riyadh right now and sit down with Islamic scholars in Saudi Arabia or in Egypt, you might not get that same flexibility that you get out of other religions. It's possible that that Islam is a very stringent, coarse religion, which is an unforgiving theology, and it's possible that it's based off of bad information and that Muhammad was not a good person. This is a possibility. And though we call it a world religion, from a historical perspective, we might not enjoy it as much if we were to really look at it from a literal perspective and not a global world religion.
Well, I actually had a Christian friend that would constantly say this. I don't know how much I subscribe to this, but he would say Islam started 600 and some odd years after Christianity, so it's like 600 years behind. There's a lot of catching up to do. Now, that's where he's coming from. It's an interesting opinion. My one concern is when I speak with Christians, and I've been in these classes where it was interfaith, and I had to take a class like this once for a degree that I was doing, and they asked, it was between Jews and Christians, they asked everybody to write down what is the purpose of this course, and they found this observation semester after semester. All the Jews wrote one thing, and all the Christians wrote another thing, and it was the same thing. It was all the Christians wrote. This was about getting closer to our roots. We want to know about beginnings and of Christianity, and all the Jews wrote, well, we want to prevent another Holocaust. Now, what's interesting is that Christians and Jews have this kind of relationship where they do understand their Abrahamic faiths. But having talked to Muslims, they'll tell you, well, Moses was a Muslim, and Abraham was a Muslim, and they'll tell you Jesus was a Muslim, and I find that to be something of a problem, because where's the gratitude in that if you inherited monotheism from Judaism? And I can only help without any condescension to Muslims, but I find it rewriting and having an Islamic-centered kind of view of the world, which is in the theology now. This is what they say. And there's a really good video on this with Corey Gil Schuster. He asks Muslims, what were you before you were Islamic? What was the nation? So yes, there are things that have to be worked out. And I think people have to understand there's one thing to come in as a believer, and there's another thing with historical development and facts to acknowledge. I even had an individual tell me that he was offended. Now, Muslims are traditionally offended by the term Mohammedanism because they don't believe that you're worshiping the Prophet. They believe you're worshiping Allah, right? But he was also offended by the term Abrahamic faith, which I thought was extremely unfortunate to be offended by that kind of term because it only includes, it only unites in a way, and it's unfortunate that that individual was that exclusionary, which can happen when people misinterpret things or interpret it their own way.
Well, it's a little bit like turning on television and choosing what you want to watch, or coming to a clubhouse room and picking what you want to listen to. So, I believe, metaphorically, we're cups and we are what we put into ourselves. So, based on where you were born and all these things, I mean, that totally shapes who you are. But, if you have access to a library and you want to expand your consciousness, expand your personality, expand your identity, you just have to pick up books because without the words, without the concepts, you can never have those thoughts. So, that I think the biggest miscommunication, or the problem what we have here is is we have a communication problem. We don't have Neuralink to just put in all the information. And so we have disgust and we have distrust and we have anger at information that is either opposed or what we haven't had put in. But I think what a lot of anti-intellectuals fail to miss is the symbolism, the metaphor, the motif behind what it is that they claim. And they don't see it for the spirituality or the divinity of that symbol. And so they miss the beauty of it, and they're really just they're just political. And so if you go long enough with a Muslim or you go long enough with a liberal, ultimately they don't just say that's weird. They say I'm political, and they admit it, and they say fuck it. I am just political. And they come to that rationalization and realization after enough time of discussing their movement. And it's not a movement. They're just political personally.
The way I've heard it described is, according to a guy called Rajiv Malhotra, is that if Judaism was version 1, Christianity is version 2, an update, so to speak, and Islam is claiming to be version 3, the latest and greatest version, and there's always going to be this incompatibility. Nobody's going to accept the other because everybody will claim we have the latest update. And then, so there can only be a temporary truce, but there can never be harmony between these three faiths. I don't know what to think of it, but it kind of makes sense to me based on what I'm seeing.
Well, there's religions today that synthesize all of it together, the coexistence movement. And, you could say it works via that methodology, but go to Lebanon, go to Iran, go to Saudi Arabia, where they live outside the scope of a Western legal system, and you'll see what Sharia is. It's an amalgamation of politics, law, military, everything. It's the everything in one solution. It's the button that fixes everything. So if you think version 3, that updated version, is what fixes the solution, fixes the situation, you're far away from the truth.
But I wonder if this is built into the DNA of monotheism, right? I mean, yeah, the spirituality aside, that's understood. But if you're monotheist, then it's either your God or nobody else's. I mean, there cannot be any alternative. There's no plurality allowed in that in that framework.
Yeah, but we use the term monotheism all the time when actually we're talking about polytheism, because even in Christianity, it's more than just one God. And in Judaism, there's some aspects of polytheism as well.
Yeah, what
For example,
It's called the Shekhinah. It's the divine aspect of Hashem, meaning that when you say Elohim, I think it means divine family. So it's not just a divine God; it's a divine family.
doesn't Elohim means gods or God? Basically,
Yes, it's one thing because it's a cultural lack. Okay, it was left over from the way they talked in Hebrew 1,200 BC when they were struggling. Okay, but mistake. It wasn't a snap of a finger and then everybody became monotheistic overnight. It was a constant battle to convince more and more people within the tribe. And there was another idea called syncretism. They actually believed in and practiced monotheistic Judaism, but yet they would clandestinely in a home they'd have these other idols. So it's an evolving process. By the time Islam and Christianity came into game, they've inherited a very refined, complete, monotheistic kind of Judaism. At that point, we're talking about 1,200 years of evolving. So for anyone to say we're the perfect, Judaism has been very blunt and honest about the whole. It's like seeing, excuse the term, the bloopers, or seeing what went on behind the stage, or the dress rehearsal or whatnot. Judaism has been always open about that. So to point the finger and say, well, you're not this, you're not that, and to use terms like once was it Ethan that said we have to understand things in the context today. If you ask any Jew what they believe, even though they might say Elohim, which is a plural, but we use this plural suffix for other things as well. We say mayim is water. We say chaim, even though we only believe you live once. Although there are streams that believe in reincarnation, but chaim is life. So grammatically, it may or may not imply plurality in those texts. But the most important prayer, and I think Adrian knows this, what is the most important prayer in Judaism? Isn't it, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God?
Shema.
Yeah. One. The oneness of God. And that's the same thing in Islam. I think they call it Tawheed, right?
Well, that's a universal concept, though. That's duality versus non-duality, or dualism and non-dualism. It's
No, no, no. I just missed the part. What is the most important prayer in Islam?
I didn't hear that.
No, he was talking about Judaism, not Islam. He was talking about
He was
Judaism.
saying something about Islam.
no. He said that Islam has a corollary prayer, to the Shema, which says that I and God and Israel are one.
No, I didn't say that. I said, first of all, in Judaism they have this prayer that God is one. But in Islam, I know that there's a concept of Tawheed. And if someone can elaborate, I think that is.
Yes, Tawheed is Tawheed of Allah, not anyone else. Tawheed of Allah, Tawheed of Rasulullah.
Okay.
Two different things. That actually differentiate between you and see, because Allah is a proper noun. Most of the people translate Allah as God. It is not Allah as God. It is Ilah as God. Ilaha. Allah. That means there is no God except Allah. Allah is the God. Allah is a proper noun. Now you have to have tawheed, that is your belief and your faith upon Allah, and then of course Rasulullah, that is Muhammad.
Which means the belief in a single God is not enough. Be more specific.
One thing I'd like to clarify is the difference between submitting, which is the Islamic term, and maybe in other religions it's believing. What is the difference between submitting and believing?
You can actually say so because Islam believes in submitting, not believing. You have to submit to Allah and His Rasul. Hazrat Subhanahu wa Ta'ala Muhammad Sahib. So,
But that doesn't sound very amicable, does it?
that is what I'm saying. It doesn't sound rational either.
So, what's interesting is submitting.
You don't have to submit before Rasulullah. You don't have to submit before Muhammad, because he even submitted himself to the God Almighty.
You have to submit yourself to the God Almighty is what I'm hearing, right?
Exactly. You're gonna believe that, Muhammad is the last prophet. Yeah, go.
He is the last prophet. Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is the last prophet as per the Islam. And you have to believe that यार, do you, okay, let's speak that way. Ahle Kitab, or for that matter, the people of the book, do not believe in that fact, right? We are very, very much clear on that fact. They do not believe in that thing. That Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the last prophet, or he is the seal of the prophets, for that matter. But you have to submit to the tawheed of Allah, that what Allah is saying. That is the kalma, right? The kalma, very much the kalma go whenever someone says. So kalma is a very phenomenon of the subcontinent or something like that. But when you speak of the kalma that says La ilaha illallah Muhammadan Rasulullah, and before that, even in the adhan, the people actually say that I actually give the testimony. This word is the fact that you ultimately are submitting to this very fact that there is no God except Allah, and there is Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the last prophet, and that's how it works. And we all know about it. Ethan, come on, that we.
Okay, but there's something you may understand my view on this is there's something kind of unfortunate about submitting as opposed to believing, because submitting is something we might do out of reluctance. Believing is something we do intuitively. So if religions bring us to a spiritual state, but one person is doing it reluctantly or out of force, or because he's submitted, because he's not really a spiritual person, that's the only reason why you have to submit to something instead of willingly do it, intuitively doing it. I mean, do you see the issue here? Anyone?
Yeah, 100%. So I can tell you from Hindu perspective. From Hindu perspective, even belief is not mandated because personalities differ. So in Hinduism, we have multiple paths to spirituality or divinity or moksha, right? And depending on your personality, you might be a very logical person who cannot believe easily, who's not very faith oriented, if you will. So for those kind of people, we have other paths. The path of practical karma or yoga, which is yoga is very non-belief based system. But for people who believe, we have the bhakti movement, which is where we have devotion and Krishna and Hare Krishna and those guys from ISKCON who are very belief oriented. To them, logic is not that appealing, or logic alone is not that appealing. So it's a multiplicity of paths, and no path is superior than another. I mean, anyway.
Well, yoga can set you free, and a lot of problem with people who are in religion is they want to get free, but they can't get free because their religion and the programming they're operating off of keeps them bound. So yoga, like I was talking about earlier, when I do yoga every day, and I stretch my body, I no longer have pain in my lower back, in my hamstrings. So literally just being free from physical pain, you could say, is one way of liberation. The state of essentially being bodiless because you're not reminded of that lower back pain and that sciatica or that arthritis. I mean, there's a health aspect to yoga, which it's as a Muslim, if you're not, this is the thing about Islam, when they get down on their knees and they do their prayers, that's actually their yoga, and they actually have that whole practice of praying in the way that they do relieves a lot of back pain, and it cracks their what's that muscle in the bottom called
The lumbar region.
the lumbar. So what I'm saying is there's an element of yoga caked or baked into Islam through their prayer service, and when they do their whole thing. So
Well, I don't think that's enough. That's enough of an exercise to create the value you're trying to describe.
well, when you're engaging in constant warfare, it's a pretty quick way to get rid of that. to get your fucking chiropractic working.
Well, no, I mean, when you think about warfare in the monotheistic religions, I mean, there is a level of hierarchy there that speaks to following rules. Abraham was the first prophet of the three Abrahamic religions. And before the fiats of God came down on high, I mean, everything was sacrificial, and most of humanity was involved in sacrificial rituals. And so the emergence of one God with rules kind of set forth an ability to order society around more legalisms. And Islam, and you see that in Islam today. God and his rules are one and the same with government. You can't traverse the one without the other without incurring the wrath of, getting your possibly hand chopped off for stealing or beheaded for slandering Allah or Muhammad. So even in today in Israel, we're seeing the emergence of the right wanting to introduce rabbinical courts to decide not just divorces and marriage, but also other legal avenues. And so, this is the legacy of all that, in my opinion.
Well, look at Abraham and Isaac. God told Abraham, cut your son's head off. And so that, to me, that's not literal. That's a metaphor for ego death. And it always seems to deal with beheadings. And I think that's the metaphor for kill yourself or die before you die, not meaning literally kill yourself, but psychologically, spiritually. Just use the pointing method. Use your ears, use your eyes. Shut up. Stop pontificating. Stop automatically thinking, and just be the silent witness. And from that perspective, that's how the sage essentially reframes the position, meaning that as the observer and not the I guess antagonist or protagonist. Do you see what I'm saying? Like there's something in the ego death, which is the root essence of sagehood, and Judaism and all the world's religions have that aspect to the esoteric practice or esoteric philosophy of that religious system.
Can I make a comment on that? God said to Isaac, God said to Abraham, cut your son's head off. Is that how you used it?
Yeah, that's how I framed it. Yeah.
That's not how it actually went down, but
Right. I'd like to hear what David has to say about that, because then I'd like to say something else. How did it go down?
well, it was Abraham trying to show his total devotion to God, and the highest value that he had in his world at that time was his son Isaac. And we all know how the story went. That I guess God commanded him at the 11th hour to not do it. It's been a while, Etan, so I
Oh no, this is not a history test, and I do appreciate what you said, because Adrian, you said all we have to do is read the book and see the way you read it and see the way that David read it. Now I'm going to say one more thing about it.
I'm not saying what I said was accurate. I'm just generalizing.
Oh, beyond accuracy, look, in Hebrew, I think he said sacrifice your son. And the word sacrifice is the root word of getting near something. Okay, so this is spiritually what was supposedly going on. When we look at the words and what they really mean in the language. So when you sacrifice this, you're getting closer to God. And that was the spirituality, contextuality of what was going on. Anyway, yeah, it was just a difficult pill to swallow, hearing only a physical thing going on there, Adrian, without the
Okay,
spiritual.
just one question. Was it Isaac or Ishmael? Ethan and
Now that is an interesting discussion, because of course the Muslims will tell you that it's Ishmael, and the Hebrews will tell you that it was Isaac. Okay, the Muslim logic being that if you're going to make a sacrifice, you sacrifice the eldest one, and Ismail was 13 years older than Isaac. So there's the Muslim logic in that. But again, not to be offensive, I think the Jewish logic would say that Sarah was a wife to Abraham, so this was their son. Hagar was a concubine of sorts. Does that strike with what you know too, Kartikeya?
that much I know. I know the logic.
Either way, the lesson that should have been drawn from that was do not sacrifice people, do not sacrifice children. And then there's another religion, of course, we know Christianity, who's taken this as foreshadowing eventually the sacrifice of readings. So many readings on one text. It's just amazing.
Well, that also differs within the Islam because Hazrat Isa alayhi salam was not sacrificed. Ethan, if I'm not wrong, he was ascended to the heaven, right? And some lookalike was actually crucified.
Yeah, okay. It's like Jesus didn't die, he was ascended to heaven. But, all right, well, the point is that people have used this text. I was told by historians that Judaism being the new kid on the block, the new religion, and one of the things they wanted to change was this Mesopotamian.
Just one thing, Ethan, that one thing that I wanted to confirm that Jesus is not the Messiah as per the Jewish law or for that Jewish
We're in the Matrix, but
or for that matter from
it is obvious to every believing Jew, to Jews, that he's not their Messiah. Absolutely. Jews are still waiting for their Messiah, but they do not call him Jesus. And Muslims, I think, agree with this.
Muslims actually believe that Jesus was actually a prophet, not Messiah, for that matter. No, he was Masih. He was Masih, but he will become Masih and all those things are very different. But he was a prophet, not God as per the Christian beliefs.
In Judaism, he's not seen as any prophet of any sort. They even call him a false Messiah or a false prophet. That guy just couldn't put it any more gently than that.
Well,
Dr. Dick, what do you think what a Messiah is? What does it stand for?
To be social. What do you think politics stands for? It's polity, to be polite.
The definition of
Let him
Quran
kneel
actually means who
first.
saves people and actually. Pardon? It's an
I'm not a theologian.
I thought someone was mirroring, like a kid was mirroring or something. I think it was Adrian, if I'm not wrong.
All right.
Adrian? No, Adrian.
the word Messiah
Adrian
refers
wasn't the Messiah.
The word Messiah refers to someone from the Davidic bloodline that was going to deliver Israel from its enemies. And recall that it was Roman occupation that controlled the state of Israel. And also recall it was the prophet Daniel who prophesied in his writings that around the time of Jesus' birth, the timing of the Jewish Messiah would emerge. This is why we had a lot of messianic imposters that emerged out of that era. Jesus just happened to be one of the more successful promoters of that idea. One, because he was born into a village that was populated with Davidic bloodlines. His mother Mary could trace her lineage back to that. And secondly, I've heard it argued through conjecture, through sort of speculation, that the historical Jesus didn't set out to start a new religion. In fact, was believed that he was taking the bloodline right of the messianic prophecies of Daniel and then taking them to the people and attempting to reorder, refashion, sort of purge, what he saw were deficiencies in the Judaic cultures, the rabbinical Rand cultures, as well as the commingling of Jewish and Roman existence. Now, obviously, we all know how human beings are born, the science behind birth and whatnot, and the virgin birth, the way that the Christians have fashioned that Jesus existed, obviously is in line with Roman and Greek mythology, where gods come down and they bed a mortal and one of their children are born. Take for example, the mythology of Hercules. So this all came after the fact, but who sired Mary's child? If not done, through divine intervention. Well, some have argued that potentially she was manhandled by a Roman soldier, or might have had improper relations with one, and then Joseph was brought in to sanitize that union. Jesus was, by all account, 100% Jewish. He would have been bar mitzvahed. He would have been reared in the responsibilities of going into adulthood. Why don't we know anything about his formative teenage, early adult years? We don't know anything about those years until he emerges back on the scene and leads his movement. And I think it was also argued pretty heavily that he took it all the way to the mat, and Pontius Pilate didn't see.
David, you could also claim that it's the cult of John.
John the Baptist.
Yeah, because the word Jah is a divine word like the word El. And Jah and John it is like Hermes. So there's a Greek aspect of mythology to all of this, as well as Egyptian mythology.
Okay, I buy that argument. Yeah. So anyway, I think Jesus really believed that the divine was going to usher in the wiping out of the Jewish enemies, i.e., the Romans, and reconstitute a new government. But he died on the cross, and we all know what happened after that. But there's probably a lot of archaeology yet to be undiscovered below the ruins in Jerusalem, where there's possibly a tomb where he's buried. We just haven't found him.
I very much doubt it.
I want to take a second and thank everyone for the great conversation and the respect that we've had to let everyone talk. And I really appreciate it.
But isn't there a tomb in Jerusalem that the Catholic Church presides over where they claim that Jesus is born? I mean, not born, but buried?
Church of the Holy Sepulchre.
Yeah, so I mean, if you think they're going to discover some crypt, I mean, it's already there.
Well, no. So the guy that wrote this book called The Jesus Dynasty is an archaeologist, and he goes over to Israel, and he's written a lot, and he's studied a lot of the artifacts there, and he finds a lot of, burial tombs where the ancient Israelites used to bury their dead inside these things called ossuaries, made out of limestone, and on top of the limestone, you would see in Aramaic the names of the deceased, and you would find a lot of these ossuaries with names like John, James, a lot of common names that existed back then. So these are first century, going back to the first century, by the way. So he's been able to document the time frame of these discoveries. So anyway, I'm just putting it out there that chances are we won't ever find the original tomb of Jesus with his remains. This is part of the whole resurrection that the Christians have proffered. But again, I go back to where's the historical record of his life after age 13, I believe, 12, 13, until he's about, I think, 29, 30, before he's crucified. So again, I don't know if I have all the dates right, but anyway, and then the other thing too is when they found a lot of the remains of the early Christian followers, a lot of the early Christian followers were Jewish, were poor Jews that liked his message. And when Constantine took over the capital of Rome after he had waged his battles, and he had that vision before he went to battle about the vision of the cross, they said that the idea of the cross was not a part of the symbolism of the early Christians. That was something introduced by Constantine. And a lot of the early Christian, they used to throw these Christians to the lions, these followers of Jesus, and a lot of their remains, and they used to hole up in the catacombs underneath the Colosseum, and they wouldn't find anything that remotely resembled early Christian symbols. And that was all introduced by Constantine, in the Holy Roman Empire.
I've read that the cross, the horizontal beam represents a woman, and the vertical represents a man, and so it's a question of gender, as being one of the aspects of the divine. And you know, I don't know if you've ever read Marcus Aurelius, but that's from 200 AD, and if you read Gautama Buddha, that's from about 200 BC. So Christ is in the middle of expansive philosophical understandings. And there's a lot of people that hypothesize that Jesus went east and came back west with the knowledge. So if you read Gautama Buddha, it's fascinating because it's very direct transmission of high value intelligence and wisdom. And I don't know why you say no to that. I mean, have you ever read the Dhammapada by the Buddha? Until you read it, you shouldn't poo poo it because, I mean, it's
I'm not poo-pooing it. I have read it, but the implication is that he learned all these ideas about mercy and compassion. He had to leave his own network and go so far away to learn these noble ideas.
no, what I'm saying is he probably didn't travel there, but what I'm saying is information was still floating around.
Well, that's because a lot of his ideas and writings were so revolutionary at the time. They want to assign.
I don't think he wrote anything though.
No, but I mean, he spoke and he wrote. He's like the equivalent of Socrates in ancient Greece.
A lot of ideas were added on along the way.
Right. Yeah, 100%. But yeah, I mean, there's talk that. Well, going back to the cross. The reason the cross was used is because that's what he was crucified on, and the Romans used this as a form of death and punishment. This wasn't unique to Jesus' death, being put on a cross. It's just that the argument is that he had the more brutal form of death by pounding his hands and feet with nails. But crucifixion was a torturous way that the Romans dealt with their convicted. However they decided.
Well, I've read that Christ wasn't actually hung up on a crucifix. He was just nailed to a pole because that's the way Romans did crucifixion. There was no crossbeam. So it's possible that, Jesus was not crossbeam crucified, but just pulled up. And the esoteric belief, huh?
This just expresses the fact that we're talking about events and when they discuss these events, it was hundreds of years away from the actual events. We're discussing them thousands of years. So I was going to go back onto Jesus' influence from the West. And maybe you know this better than I do, Adrian. One of the 7 words in Greek for love that maybe Jesus was influenced by being the most prolific one being agape, right? Unconditional love.
Yeah, I hear that come up a lot.
But anyway, whether it was a cross or whether the Jews thought this or that about Jesus at the time, these are the events that were talked about hundreds of years later with their own biases.
Well, if you read Marcus Aurelius or Epictetus, Stoic philosophy, and then you read the New Testament, I got to tell you, the information in Stoicism is far more advanced, complex, intellectual, intelligent than what you'll read from the Gospels. And so, how do you rationalize Roman philosophy with Christian theology and think it's any better? It's political, meaning that the Christians were trolling the Romans. The Romans were pissed that the Christians were accumulating power with their cult, and so they responded politically through violence. I'm just saying that if you pick up Marcus Aurelius or Epictetus, you can't not be flummoxed and impressed at the wisdom of the Roman moralists and stoicists.
Well, curiously enough, you mentioned Stoicism, and Stoicism was started by Zeno of Citium, right? And he was actually a Phoenician, no less.
Yeah, I mean, it's basic psychology, but it's also neurolinguistic programming for logical positivism. But honestly, Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus, like I have this Harvard classic of Plato, Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, Cleanthes, but yeah, the Stoic fathers, Zeno, etc. That information is of such high value, and then when you compare it to the Gospels, I think that Marcus Aurelius and the intelligence of the Roman elite, or at least Aurelius, I mean, it's very special and very unique. And in my opinion, it supersedes the wisdom of Christ, Well, you might find in the Old Testament. Now, Psalms, Ecclesiastes, Proverbs, like those are of extremely high value intelligence. But the Romans were no dummies. And I mean, you could say they were geniuses, or at least, Marcus Aurelius was at the very upper echelon of extreme intelligence. I mean, he did kill hundreds
But
of
you have to
people,
see,
though.
you gotta understand something. I mean, Constantine understood that he couldn't keep killing these Christians. He tried to wipe them out, and he couldn't do it. So he adopts their beliefs, and remember, he convened the Council of Nicaea, and he brought in all the high priests from around the region. Armenia, Egypt, modern, Lebanon, and he had all those guys come together, and he wanted to canonize what the rules were, what the beliefs were. So he wanted to, I guess, just like Muhammad created all his rules with the Quran, he was doing the exact same thing. And we've seen the outcomes of both of these religions. The Crusades, the pogroms against the Jews throughout Europe. All of this stuff. It's all based upon conversion by the sword. And we're still suffering from the implications of it today.
I mean, Christianity should have been an updated version of the paganism, meaning that they cleaned it up. They took away the insanity of the cults. But I can go to my local Planned Parenthood facility right now, just literally across the street from my house here in Chicago. There's an abortion clinic. And so I just wonder, what was the point? I mean, child sacrifice seems like it's baked into the situation and we can't get out of committing, beheadings, whether it's from Isaac and Abraham. You see what I'm saying?
Wait a minute. We have to distinguish between the act of an abortion for medical reasons, what have you, versus killing a newborn baby, which is the form of infanticide, which is practiced pretty heavily in one-child policy China for a lot of years. So we have to distinguish between the two, I think, instead of, because then every woman who commits an abortion is a murderer. And I don't think we want to make that.
No, what I'm saying is the problem is not women choosing to have abortions. The problem is the government allowing primarily female doctors to commit infanticide. It's a business. It's for profit. It's funded by taxpayers. It's not about whether abortion should be allowed or not allowed or the law on abortion. It's about allowing the business practice to take place in a kind of a surreptitious way, in the sense that like you don't really know that you go to med school so you can perform a medical procedure that we legally call abortion. I mean, it's a government run, government funded, government supervised. It's a question of governance or the law, which I believe is the problem, not the debate about abortion, but about the business situation of abortion, that we have these doctors that are making a lot of money, and people take advantage of it. I mean, you get recommended unnecessary procedures and you get diagnoses all the time, but it's not a diagnosis. It's you're pregnant and you don't want to accept the responsibility of your pregnancy, so you want to clean it up, and the government allows you to do it, and you're going to pay this abortion provider, Dr. Sarah, whatever, and so to me, that's the thing, is I don't see it as a debate. I see it as, okay, we are legally enforcing this in the sense that there's no repercussion for infanticide.
But there is. If you commit murder, a child 1 day old, it's murder. You're gonna go to jail. I mean, what are you talking about?
What are you talking about? I'm saying I can go, if I get my
Infanticide is
girlfriend
when the child's
pregnant.
born and you kill it, or the little child, as soon as
Well, what's the difference? If it's 8 months in the uterus, then you put in a Da Vinci chopping machine and you excise the head and you put it in an oil barrel afterwards. What's the difference?
Not that many 8 month children are killed that way. Most doctors will not do an abortion after the second trimester. What are you talking about?
I don't know the real numbers, but like I'm pretty sure a lot of
It's
women.
very, very, very small.
I know, but why does the government allow these doctors to get away with that? To me, that's egregious.
Well, in some cases, obviously, and you're a very intelligent man, I know you know this, it's to protect the mother who may be medically in trouble because of this birth and to save her life. And that's really the main reason why someone would do an
But see,
abortion.
this gets back into the abortion debate. What I'm really concerned about is the business aspect. That the government, that you can go to med school, open up a facility, and be protected legally for committing abortion. I mean, that's what's really the thing that bothers me.
22 states of this union right now. I mean, the Supreme Court threw it back to the states. 22 states you can do that in. In Texas, if you get an abortion out of state, your neighbor can turn you in.
Yeah, in the state of Idaho, they passed a law that anybody who helps transport a woman seeking an abortion in a state that it is legal is committing a felony. And they want to leverage the Comstock Act. What's that?
I'm laughing because this kind of gets to the crux of what I think is the problem, is that we have a government sponsored, government permissible, it's a medical business. Like, I think we just have to reframe it to try to, to get out of the debate cycle that we are in when it comes to talking about abortion. I mean, when I see a video of an abortionist,
How is it different from every other medical procedure that's also part of the medical business?
well, there's a lot of unnecessary medical procedures that, take place. I mean, for example, thyroid, constantly removing thyroids. And it's like, you know what? You got an anger management problem. You don't have a thyroid disease. You're chronically angry at everything you hear.
I believe there are unnecessary operations, but I think that ultimately we have to take responsibility for our own health and decide whether those are necessary.
Yeah, but have you had a family member killed by a doctor? I have.
I have not, no. I've had them saved by doctors.
Well, I mean, it doesn't always work.
I
And
understand
sometimes there's a
doctors
profit
make
motive.
mistakes. Trust me, I understand that.
I'm just saying that, like, in terms, I mean, again, I don't want to repeat myself, but, I'm just saying that the abortion thing to me is an important topic because right now at the DNC, everything is abortion, everything is trans, everything is LGBTQ. And that's just a cover for what they're really doing, which is national security industrial complex, military industrial complex, foreign wars, regime changes. I mean, are the people at the DNC going to protest the war in the Ukraine? Nope. They don't even want to talk about it. They want to talk about abortions, and that's called cover and conceal.
What's obviously going on in Ukraine is that we are fighting the Russians by proxy. Okay? So we're getting some.
Yeah, but we shouldn't be doing that. The Russians are not our enemy. That's a legacy war. And
Russians walked in there and took property, and if they had not done that, we would not be at war. Ukrainians don't want their government. They don't want that oppressive regime. They're fierce fighters, and over 100,000 of them are dead. Over 500,000 Russians likely are dead.
well, I don't know. When Trump, what did he say in the? Fuck, what did he say? It's getting late. I'm getting exhausted. But Trump said that. What the fuck did he say about Ukraine? Anyways, it is what it is. I mean, I don't. It is. It's fucked up. I mean, well, how many people have died there now? 600,000. It's insanity. But 2 million died in Iraq and Afghanistan. So it's like, if it's a numbers game, Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton are like the biggest mass murderers, of recent human history.
I do really appreciate your comments and your coming here to. I'm glad you found us. I know your home is normally Spaces, and I hope that you'll join us again.
Oh, Trump said that Zelensky was an honorable man. That when Trump had a phone call, Zelensky stuck up for him and said it was a perfectly fine phone call. And he doesn't know what happened since or something to that extent. I mean, I don't see Zelensky as being a highly moral and ethical leader, but maybe as an opportunist or a chameleon type of individual. So how that war de-escalates, and a peace movement is enacted between those two peoples, I think is inevitable. And they're very pragmatic business people. They want this reconciled, but like you said, the U.S. is using through manipulation and money and influence and power to do a proxy war.
That's worse than, the one that invaded Ukraine.
You go back to the prima causa about an invasion event, but I would just say that I dated this chick here in Chicago. The war with Russia and Ukraine is much longer than people know. I mean, it's like a 20-year war at this point. It's not just the invasion.
That Putin is upset about land that was taken from them and these lands around. And he's not going to stop with Ukraine. You think Poland and all these people are excited about the being the next ones?
But you really think Putin has Poland in his sights?
He has more countries in his sights. He wants that Mother Russian land back. And now we have found out what a paper tiger he is, except he has nukes. To empty the prisons, to get the type of meat grinder war that he would sacrifice over 500,000 of his people for no good reason.
He's already had some latest round of generals who are calling out his actions now. I think he's got some cracks in his latest incursion by the Ukrainian army into Russian soil. I think they've sieged about 400 square miles.
Our biggest crime is doing what we did in Vietnam, giving them enough to fight but not enough to finish.
Well, I mean, we weren't really necessarily supplying the South Vietnamese. We were failing to attack in the north with bombers and obliterate them. We can play the political game or we can play the all-out war to destruction like World War II with Germany. But nobody wants that.
No, but here's
American people don't want that either.
the problem is that a desperate Putin could unleash nukes potentially. That's the threat there. But yeah, we could have given Ukraine. I mean, we give Israel. Again, I'm not trying to. Just for different reasons, obviously. But Israel is getting our best stuff. Ukraine is not getting our best stuff. If Ukraine got our best stuff, it would obviously tilt the balance their way. And we're concerned that a desperate Russia would act desperate. And so we're giving them enough to survive. But I don't know how this ends. Maybe it's just they draw down through attrition. They're going to have a peace deal. I mean, the Donbass is pretty much Russian occupied as it is, Russian speaking. Not to say that they deserve the land, but at some point, I mean, do they lose just that, or do they lose more of their port cities? They've already kind of lost Crimea, so it's ugly. Yeah, it's ugly.
Well, I mean,
I'd like to go back to one more thing, Adrian. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit too. I need to calm down. But during that same phone call that we called to Zelensky, maybe not straight up the best person in the world, and I don't know a lot about him. Ukrainians are very mighty fighters. They were in World War II as well. Trump's main reason for that phone call was to get dirt on Biden. That's what he wanted from Zelensky. And when he wouldn't provide it, he started to cut and threatened to cut aid for that very reason to Ukraine.
Congressionally mandated by law aid to Ukraine, and that's where he broke. That's what got him in trouble. What was the brother that turned him in? The two military guys. Alexander Vidman.
yeah, Colonel Vindman.
It was Alexander Vidman who was in on the call, who was assigned to listen to the conversation. They provided the testimony of what Trump did in that shakedown with Zelensky. So those guys paid a high price for their loyalty to the rule of law and to, standing tall with their, the sworn oath to the Constitution, not to Trump. And we saw how their military careers were ruined after that. So,
Yeah, but Colonel Vindman got on Curb Your Enthusiasm, so that's a big
come
success.
on, man. Jesus Christ.
He did. He was on Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I don't like Colonel Vindman. I mean, I don't like his demeanor. I think he's kind of, I guess, he seems like to have a self-importance about him, as opposed to being like a tactical military officer and practicing the art of shutting the fuck up. So to me, he seems like he's political. And okay, so Trump was trying to get dirt on his political opponent, but I mean, in terms of breaking laws, what the fuck is politics? I mean, it
Just told you, sir. He did, and he should have been impeached for it.
for telling Zelensky, why is Joe Biden's son doing business deals with your largest energy supplier? I mean, the whole Colonel Vindman
And
thing.
withholding money that was already appropriated if he couldn't get the information.
Well, anyways, I mean, I don't believe in spending a single dollar outside of this country until we resolve the issues here. I think the international regime change and, blackmail game, whether you're Republican or Democrat, shouldn't be happening. It seems to me to be anti-constitutional, anti-American, and a waste of our time and money when we have very
That's failed a lot. But I'll tell you what, when they're on our shores, it's going to be too late.
Who's going to be on our shores? The Russians?
The world, when we pull back and let the treaties that Trump pulled out of, and now that China's taken over Africa because we did that and owns them the same way that the French own Haiti in servitude. Okay? So it creates a vacuum that will be filled by other people.
Well, that's fine, but the U.S. doesn't have the money, the resources, the people to go into Africa and do what China can do with their 1.4 billion fucking engineers. We're a country that operates off of TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. The country is awash in screen addiction. The country doesn't do anything anymore. It's a service-based economy living off of the Federal Reserve.
We're done.
Let me ask you,
You're done, Adrian?
Adrian. Hey, Adrian, how many people around the world are just dying to attend Chinese universities? How many people are trying to stream into that country?
People in that country want to get the fuck out and bring their money here.
No, but answer the question. We have droves of Chinese flying to places like Ecuador, where Ecuador's given them visa-free transit, and then spending thousands of dollars to be coyoted into this country. I mean, it's all over the place. Why are they doing that? China's such a wonderful place.
I'm not saying China's a wonderful place, and I'm not saying people want to go to their universities there. They probably suck.
Yeah, that's probably emblematic of the whole place to live.
I'm just saying what the State Department does by passing out.
You're surveilled. You're watched. They've got a real estate crisis that's probably 3 times what our 2008 was, which they have.
Well, they can't get the money out of their country, so where do they stick it? They stick it in shitty condo buildings.
There's no transparency with their books. I had a buddy that
I know it's a huge problem. It's all fraud.
He worked for Merrill Lynch, and he was illegal. He evaluated the transactions the investments they would make, and they were doing work on the Three Gorges Dam. Three Gorges Dam, if anybody knows anything about China, is a big, massive public works project. Anyway, he said that Merrill Lynch had to pull out of the deal because China demanded modifications to the engineering specs that they weren't in agreement with. They wanted to build a more dangerous structure than what the engineers would allow. And they said they pulled out. They said, we can't do business with this country. They don't want to play by the rules. So that, at some point, those dams might give, and we don't know when. But this is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a country that plays loose with rules, from all bureaucratic levels. I mean, hell, they took their billionaire Jack Ma and they put him on house arrest Imagine if we did that to Bill Gates or Steve Jobs. Right?
Well, Jobs is dead, but I would love to see Bill Gates
but
put on house arrest.
I'm done. So.
I mean, I think the vaccine is the weapon. I don't think that the COVID-19 is more dangerous than the vaccine. I think Bill Gates is a very dangerous human being.
And how are we attacked by COVID-19 from Wuhan? I believe that's it's actually.
Yeah, Dr. Fauci was outsourcing bioweapon research to China. Does that make any fucking sense? Nope.
I don't love with it either.
Obama made him take his research offshore, and Fauci, and the whole thing is just fugazi. The point is, America is going to have a come to Jesus moment.
Right now with avian bird flu, which is 10 times worse if it gets loose than anything that came out of Wuhan. But that was an attack, as far as I'm concerned, from China to our shores. We still haven't recovered.
But do you think did you know that when COVID-19 broke out, the CIA flooded China with a misinformation campaign? We're not some fucking innocent bystanders
It
here.
went the other way. All of the information that we requested was denied by China to even sequence the gene. It was only by accident that we had 2 weeks of that information before it was censored, so it could be done.
Through Operation Warp Speed to give us a Fugazi vaccine that made people sick and have killed thousands upon thousands of people. For what? They would have been better off going through the natural process of taking in the virus and passing it versus getting a vaccine, which has which makes the situation worse for you.
I'm not defending the vaccine. That shouldn't be called a vaccine, and the only reason it was done was under emergency power, and there was a lot of malfeasance in that whole system. You're absolutely
There's a lot. Listen, I read documents from the White House in 2005 where Fauci was in communication with George Bush. This was definitely a pandemic, scamdemic. And Pfizer, Moderna, J&J, they're like the legacy technology companies, like Google, Microsoft, and platform medicine is the next innovation in what we call our medical industrial complex, which is every couple of years you got to update your Samsung and iPhone inside your fucking body with a vaccine. That's business.
took the J&J vaccine. Their vaccines aren't even made by their own.
Yeah, everything's offshored in India, China. It's crazy. The cure, the solution, the problem, it all is manufactured in China.
We also found out that 150 drugs are manufactured there that were in short supply here. We found out that our hospitals can only handle about 10% of a problem, and we're overwhelmed. And so, it was a scary time for a lot of systems that were failing.
Yeah, but
And you're right.
the thing is, it was a lot of
Nobody expected
misinformation.
to find out that, without the vaccine, people, certainly young people and healthy people, could have gone through just a normal, accept it and fight it off with your body. I heard statistics, and we talked about it in Clubhouse. You take the number of people that died of COVID in California, where everything was locked down, and the number of people that died in Florida, where things were kept open, and the actual deaths are about the same.
Well, what killed more people in this country, the vaccine or the COVID-19 virus?
I don't know if the vaccine did or didn't, but comorbidities and bad health and obesity and not being responsible for your own health is what killed a lot of those people.
Yeah, but you can't say personal responsibility is on the onus of everyone because when misinformation and disinformation and the world's greatest psyop takes place, I mean, you can't really blame people for believing what they're told. It's called the anchoring effect.
Adrian, how many people in America are obese?
Oh God, like 100
You
million.
can't climb a flight of stairs. Diabetes is an epidemic. I mean, it doesn't take much to take people out.
Yeah, but the vaccine is what killed them, not COVID-19.
We have an obesity epidemic.
I get that, but they would have kept going they would have been better off going to McDonald's than going to their doctor to get Pfizer.
Let's start there.
They could have withstood 2 cheeseburgers, an extra large fry, and a Coke better than an injection from an experimental cocktail put on by Pfizer. I mean, that's just the facts. You know, Pfizer, Moderna, J&J, they should be held legally responsible for, um, adverse reaction or death. And there's a Twitter account called Died Suddenly, where you can see the most innocent young people in this country that did not die of COVID 19. They died of injections from major manufacturers. And that's just a fact. And these are innocent young people that lives were destroyed.
Understand. RFK on Spaces with Elon spoke a lot about this, and that because things were done in emergency measures, they didn't have to prove any of the safety of what they were doing at all. And the only way to get a drug approved in an emergency measure is that you have to certify that there is no other method to treat this. And there were other methods. And you can laugh about ivermectin, you can laugh about some of the other things, but there were other methods that were used, could have been used. And that is the other falsehood that was perpetrated
Well,
to get to that thing.
not only that, they made you sign away your liability, your waiver, for I don't know how many years. So you couldn't sue once you took the drug or the shot. And, that's an unprecedented gift that the government gave the big pharma. The fact that they would be not held accountable for any of the potential harm. You bump a guy with your car and you get sued for thousands of dollars for whiplash. Okay? Take a bad shot, you have no way of recouping any damages for potential side effects. So yeah, I understand all
Most
that.
dangerous, or
I had friends who didn't take the shot on that basis alone. So
Well, I heard I don't know if you know who Dr. Copeland is. He's a famous vaccinologist on this app. He dead. Susan Wojcicki, CEO of YouTube. She dead. I could go on and on and on.
we don't know how they died though. You don't have any autopsy.
Really?
Susan had
We don't know how. I'm pretty sure the vaccine had something to do with it.
This is misinformation.
That's not misinformation. Whatever cancer killed Susan Wojcicki is directly connected to the vaccine she received, and that's common amongst a lot of people who received the same. Anyways, you can believe conspiracy theories, but cause and effect, I see it all the time.
gone far,
Well, far
gone
afield.
far from our religious conversation. I really appreciate everyone's contribution. I thought it was very valuable. Even your knowledge about the Romans and everything was an education. So I thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, Hippocrates, what was the Roman doctor? Do no harm. I mean, Roman philosophy is what we're missing in this country now today. We've been taken over by CRT, BLM, DEI, LGBTQ, etc., and it's destroying the moral fabric, the ethical fabric, the character of this country, and it's all propaganda and concealment for the national security industrial complex, the biopharmaceutical industrial complex, the banking, etc. And these Democrats are the biggest hypocrites I've ever seen in my life. I live in Chicago, and I can see what they're doing. It's a giant fugazi scam, and it is what it is. But if these people keep ruling over this country, I mean, God help us, because we need competency, we need strength, and
We're dying for a better candidate on the other side, my friend, okay? And I'm sorry that person took over the normal Republican Party and fashioned it into his own party and could very well lose this to someone who's very ultra-liberal. But it's not all the Democrats' fault.
no, I mean, George, but that's the problem, is it's not a true 0 and 1, 1 and 0, or left and right. George Bush and 9/11 is the big event that brought the curtains down on all of us. I mean, that was a giant psyop, just like 9/11. I mean, just like COVID-19.
Certainly the freedoms that we signed away with the Patriot Act afterwards were not good.
I mean, why do you think this app even exists? This is a funded national surveillance app in cryptological communication research. Do you think Paul and Joe Armenia This is just a job to them. I mean, they've probably already sold out, but the point is, the national security industrial complex, people are like, oh, well, we don't have Chinese monitoring supervision like they do over there. Oh, we don't? Who do you think invented all this stuff? We did.
I need gas money, but I don't get paid till next week. What should I do? Don't even stress about it. Just download the.
Just moments ago, Vice President Kamala Harris arriving to her hotel.
Maybe get a chance to see.
So how do we take it all back?
Will be restricted.
Well, it's not about taking it back, it's about surviving it. And that's what the game's all about. Is, the situation is the situation. There is no past, there is no future, there is no now. It's all of this is so tentative. We don't know if there's going to be a thermonuclear winter on Thursday. So what's the point about worrying about the future? Meaning that if we want to take it back or we want to try to control the situation and stop the leakage, which is essentially 35 trillion going to 50 trillion and up. I mean, shit rolls downhill. Nigeria doesn't have a Federal Reserve, so when we devalue our currency, their currency automatically gets devalued. Only thing we can really do is try to understand it, profit from it, manipulate it, try to control it in the same way that these charlatans and hypocrites are manipulating the situation right now through misinformation and disinformation.
I hear you. I'm just asking honestly, when you say we, what do we do?
Well, we study philosophy and we really do nothing. We just complain. I'm not a violent person. I don't throw grenades or rocks.
But this thing that you're talking about that has developed the entire country, that's run by the military-industrial complex and corporations and whoever else is in on it, is it all too late?
No, I mean, you're a part of it. Even this app is a function of this massive situation and system. But it's like the butterfly effect. If you can do what you can do and you're a positive person full of love and compassion and friendship and kindness, we're gonna defeat these people. But the fact of the matter is all communication is hypnosis. And until you realize that we have a failure to communicate because of misinformation, disinformation, propaganda, the simulacra, this simulation is a communication word game. And until we realize this is just advertising 101. I mean, it's a push communication system. It's not a harmonious situation. It's truly disinformation, from our own government. Instead of spreading truth and clarity and transparency and divulging the secrets, we have Trump lying to us all the time. We have Kamala and Waltz lying to us all the time. Now, Trump may not lie directly, but he lies indirectly by not revealing the truth. He went to Shanksville, got on that platform, and commemorated all those people that crashed into the fucking ground in Shanksville. I don't think that happened. I think that was a fucking rocket. So when you continue to create propaganda for the deep state, but then you complain about the fucking deep state, you are the ultimate mercurial, politician. So we are fucked. We're damned if we're doing, we're damned if we don't.
That's what I'm hearing.
You're saying it was shot down and not internal commotion on the plane.
There was no plane at Shanksville and there was no plane at the Pentagon. Those were rockets.
Come on.
100%. I've seen the video of the Pentagon, and that was definitely not a fucking plane. That was a rocket. You can slow it down and see the Navy rocket. I know that sounds really, maybe conspiratorial to some people, but I don't think World Trade Center 7 was brought down by office fire furniture, do you? I've never seen a building freestyle fall at the rate of gravity from fucking office furniture fires. That's called WTC 7. That's the third skyscraper that went down.
No, I don't believe in conspiracy theories. What I believe in is that everybody's playing for themselves, and in this commotion, we get fucked one way or another. So you have to fight for your own team. That's as simple as it gets. And there's some unintentional consequences, like the COVID research escaped from the lab. It was unintentional. Maybe they were building bioweapons, who knows, but they were not intentionally releasing it. And that's how shit goes. I don't believe in it.
They're pretty sloppy, Shiva. That's for sure. But we have avian bird flu right now in cattle in the Midwest and dairy farms, and this is being underreported. This is the next pandemic, and we really aren't even talking about it to deal with what might happen.
And then monkeypox, right?
I'm okay with that. Thank you again. Appreciate everyone's contribution.
Anyways, it's a fun convo. I get the feeling that Hindus are going to save the world because they have an alternative perspective that the West does not have, and that Russia doesn't necessarily have. A lot of people are fans of Hinduism or the Bhagavad Gita or the Upanishads or the culture, but I've often said that it's either going to be the blacks in America or it's going to be the Hindus that save the world. I think everybody else is fucked.
We'll stay tuned for that. And I'm hoping there's a generation that comes up that doesn't believe in either political party that might affect a change, that has some other wisdom. And we'll see if that will help.
There could be some type of technological revolution.
I think the US could benefit from a multi-party system. Sorry, David. I was just going to say, I think the US could benefit from a multi-party system. I think the binary between the Democratic and Republican parties too, it does not capture this spectrum of, ideas and beliefs. And, it doesn't give a true place for people like Tulsi Gabbard and maybe even Trump,
Yeah, I'm hearing that more and more.
You got to admit though that the founding fathers did have some genius in terms of a bi political system, meaning that it's very efficient.
Yeah, but it's not very diverse. And you're boxed into one or the other category. And that's
But
not
in the
enough.
beginning, mostly even up to 1900 or, Congress was turned over by 1/3 to 2/3% with every vote. People participated. You didn't have these seniority systems. You didn't have the good old boy network. You had real change every time, for better or for worse.
Yeah, there's so many political parties that are just gone because they're no longer parties, meaning that the party dried up. But the Democrats and the Republicans, but particularly the Democrats, really seem to hold on. And I think it's just the word democracy or Democrat, which does not describe them. And the fact that Kamala didn't go through any primary, and she's not really chosen by the people, but chosen by, Joe. I mean, to me, how can you call yourself a Democrat when you're not going to obtain power through democratic means? So, ugh.
Actually, I'm reading today that Pelosi and Schumer and maybe even Obama, they asked
Yeah.
for a quick primary, and I think it was Joe that said no. We're going to do it this way. There was $250 million involved that was in the Biden-Harris account, and because her name was on the ballot, she could keep it and use it. And I think that was a large factor in her decision. You have, someone who can't really attack a woman or a minority the same way that he could attack his other opponents that he's so skillfully slayed. And it was more a political movement, a political stroke than the right choice.
DEI, that's all it was. They didn't intend her to be president someday. It was just a tool. And
Just the
they got
DEI,
unlucky.
part is that when Biden said it's going to be a woman and it's going to be a minority. So that's the DEI part from the way the Democrats did it from the beginning, rather than the best person. You know, there was no mandate that had to happen. I mean, no disrespect to the possible woman.
I mean, isn't she just the fulfillment of their original intention and desire? I mean, she's fulfilling that DEI card, and that's why she was chosen to begin with. And anyways, it is what it is. The thing is, she's going to be great for the economy because she's going to be a spendthrift, and she's going to just totally fucking spend as much as she possibly can. But what is her like historical understanding of even politics? I mean, is she just a total bimbo, or is she actually a very manipulative, shrewd, cutthroat individual, or
I don't
is
think you become a prosecuting attorney and are a bimbo. She was in the Senate for 4 years. She was one of the most liberal senators. Her voting record that was there. So that's what we know.
well, I mean, I've heard her father was like a Marxist professor, so clearly
Yes,
she
yes.
probably absorbed that type of. But the thing is, the Federal Reserve at 35 trillion is most definitely a Marxist entity involved in currency manipulation. And I saw a meme yesterday. It said that the Federal Reserve is a private bank and that the IRS is its collection agency. And that does seem to be kind of what's happening here is that we have this monolithic uh, banking industrial complex, which is global in scope because the Federal Reserve window is not just here in America, it's in every country. I mean, it's in particularly in Europe during the COVID-19 Heroes Act, and uh, basically it's all gangbusters. You know, I mean, banks don't die. They're more immortal than doctors. I mean, they they don't do anything. They're just accounting systems. But anyways,
But we have 6 banks that are too big to fail. That's
but we have a Democratic Party that's too big to fail. I mean, for Christ's sake, don't you think that Trump's assassination was planned by higher ups? Matthew Crooks was not a fucking organizer.
I don't.
You really think Matthew Crooks took all that initiative by himself to try to blow Trump's head off? I doubt it.
I mean, there's definitely political propaganda which causes individuals to do crazy things, and that definitely did happen. But I don't think somebody planted the guy there. Shoot.
I mean, it's possible that it's random. I'm just saying that, like, when you look at Michael Corleone, when he assassinated the cop, I mean, he says, if history has taught us anything, it's we can kill anyone. So, how the fuck? And Trump is really hated. So, I just can't see how there wasn't a more sophisticated planning, you know, prima causa, that Matthew Crooks is too retarded and too ignorant to take this upon himself to change world event history. I just don't see that as being what happened on whatever day it was. What day did he try to get? What day did his head almost get blown off? Doesn't matter.
It was in Butler, Pennsylvania rally, and I can't remember. It's probably been over a month.
Well, I'm saying it's like an October 7th day. I mean that date should be like a 9/11 date. And honestly, Trump is very nonchalant about his assassination. You know, during
Surprised.
yeah.
I mean, when in that interview with Elon, he was complimentary to the Secret Service and talked about God a little
And the
bit,
police.
and, just a miracle that if his head had been a millimeter one way or the other, it wouldn't have been his ear. And
But see, that's why I like him because he's not the asshole that we really think he is. I mean, that moment kind of made him, you know, that's your mortality moment. And, you know, he was like, "Oh, the cop fell down, he hurt his ankle." Like, is that him just being very politically shrewd or is that him actually being sincere? I have a hard time telling.
his whole life has been practicing being an asshole and winning, and whatever it takes. I mean, from 1973 to 1985, he had the meanest, most vile Roy Cohn lawyer on the face of the earth, and that was his mentor. And after that, he learned to do chaos. He learned to do whatever it took to manipulate and wear people down to get his way, aside from plausible deniability. And it's worked for him. Took them all.
And yeah, and he's a bully, no doubt. But I think this was a humbling moment for him. I think he definitely has had some kind of an influence on his thing.
I think so.
So do you think if he doesn't win, he's going to be all that upset about it? Because, based on what you're saying, if he loses, I think he's not going to call for insurrection and revolution. He's going to.
He cooked up Stop the Steal when he knew he lost. This is a man who won't admit that about 2020. Give me a break. He has lawyers ready in every state, much more prepared than last time. Last time, they mostly got thrown out of court because they filed too late. They're not going to make that mistake this time. This election will be close, and they will fight it tooth and nail. And please.
So what, you think the Supreme Court is going to determine who the next president is then?
The Supreme Court? No, the state courts, where every state election was.
So, I mean, with the Florida one, like, why didn't that go to the Supreme Court? Why did the Florida Supreme Court, why do state Supreme Courts determine the president and not the Supreme Court?
Every state has its own independent ability to do that. The states run the elections. Each state does it differently. That's the beauty of America. Can't even do that beautifully.
Well, I mean, I just get the feeling that Kamala's going to win because the voting system with Dominion and Alex Soros, I mean, they're buddy buddy.
Please, don't go there.
It's not go there. It's Dominion. I mean, I worked as an election judge. I know the Dominion voting system. I think there's flaws in it. I've thoroughly studied it. I've done all the training. I just don't trust it. And that's my opinion. It's not a conspiracy. I just do not trust Dominion voting systems.
I think she's gonna win because of her skin color, unfortunately. And I don't think she's got the brains to be the president. But neither does Trump. But I think she's more of she got lucky to be where she is. Yeah, and she's very lucky.
She has been lucky, but she has 2 debates to do well in. Her debate 2020 was upended by Tulsi Gabbard, so we'll see. Debating's not a strong suit. The last 2 policies that the Democrats put forward, $25,000 for people to buy a house, is a dumb idea. Price controls on food never works when the market is manipulated by the government. So if she wants to start talking about that, those are legitimate, stupid ideas that Mr. Trump should be talking about instead of her skin color. And we'll see. We've got a Democratic convention in 2 days. So let's see what happens. They kick the celebrities out. It's mostly going to be ex-presidents there. But she's going to have a platform, and she's going to have to start talking about her policy. Unless they don't want her to at all and get too close to the election and she gets elected anyway.
Well, the thing about...
I don't remember her opinion about anything. Like, she's not given one memorable speech or, I don't see her as an intelligent opinion maker on anything. In fact, J.D. Vance has said something interesting that I remember, although I hardly know him, right?
And I think she's probably more malleable by different parts of her party. Certainly we talked about why this country's in trouble. We talked about the extremes, whether it's sexual minorities or whoever wants to control things. We're allowing the extremes on both sides to have more power than they actually have. And that's the biggest mistake we've made recently.
She's a synthetic candidate, and that's the problem with most relationships is it's not authentic or organic. And if you want to build a business or you want to have a successful relationship with a lover, it's got to be organic. It can't be artificial. You can't buy it. And that's the problem with her candidacy is it comes off as being push communication, synthetic communication, inauthentic, inorganic, and that's why she might lose because people have bullshit detectors and they can tell what is sincere. And she does not come off as a sincere individual. She comes off as a bitch.
And it is true, whether you like Trump or not, whether he's a good person or not, you get the feeling that he's speaking what he really feels, whether you like it or not. And he is more genuine in that respect than the other candidate. I did want to say that many presidents and vice presidents don't get along, and there was nothing that Biden did to help her future, even to become the next president, by tasking her with the border and whatever else she got tasked with. So it's interesting to watch the interplay between presidents and vice presidents. And that's another reason, aside from the fact that he's a Jew, that Governor of Pennsylvania Shapiro was not chosen because he's an eloquent speaker. He has aspirations for political future and probably would overshadow Kamala Harris as vice president.
I never even heard of that guy until he announced, or they brought him up. I was like, never even heard of this motherfucker. Did you hear about him prior to all this? I never heard of him.
No, I had to go Wikipedia.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, is how is somebody going to outshine her when he has no shine? I mean, just because he's an elegant speaker?
No, I'm
Yeah.
talking about Walz. Shapiro.
Oh, Waltz, you didn't know about.
51% favorable governor of Pennsylvania that's very well liked.
But did you hear about him in the national conversation prior? I never heard of the guy.
No, I really was not, he was not on my radar.
I think she's trying to play it safe with the Muslim voting bloc in Michigan. So on and so forth. It's fine. I don't know. Maybe if she becomes president, it'll be terrible for Jews and probably many of those.
Not necessarily terrible, but it will be different than Trump.
There's so many what ifs. I mean, there could be an assassination attempt on her life. There's so many what ifs. No one knows how all of this is going to shake out. It's like a fight to
There were
the.
400 a day against Obama. Are you kidding me?
Well, I'm just saying that, shit changes randomly. And that, like, in terms of her presiding over the war effort in Ukraine, it's laughable. I mean, for Christ's sake, we need actual organic leadership, not this artificial, deep state, military industrial complex type of candidate that is totally going to do whatever they want her to do. I mean, at least, like you said, Trump says what he feels what he says. Kamala's a pushover, and she's going to lie to everybody as they push her over. It's so disgusting. Like, if you're going to lie to me, just fucking lie to me. But, like, do it to me directly. Stop with, like, the concealment stuff. It's just getting beyond obnoxious.
That's why I say, I mean, in the 2 months that are allotted, we may not find a lot of other policies, and that may get her across the finish line.
If there is one reason she should lose because of the Ukraine war, I think we have pushed Russia way too far. I mean, if Putin's really losing, he might launch, and I just hate this war to go to that extent. We have to end this fucking thing with Ukraine.
I don't know.
It's no good for
The only thing
no
that
good
the
for
people in the Middle East understand, the Israelis that figured that out a long time ago, the only thing that Putin ever backed down on was when other people were strong. You give him an inch and he will take a mile. Doesn't work.
No, we have to be strong. I'm totally for the war in the Middle East. I mean, that's the only language to understand. But Putin, I think, was pushed into this a little bit with interference in Ukraine. I mean, he wants to dominate over Ukraine. We have to give him that, right? He used to be a superpower at one point, and Ukraine is not a strategic location for the US, in many ways. So yeah, Putin could be a bad guy, but he's not a jihadist. He's not that's a different world.
But the problem is America is still trapped in the past, in the sense that our entire footing is based off of a Soviet US paradigm, which does not exist. And our response is as if we're responding from 1985. We're not asymmetrical enough. We're not practicing intelligence enough. We're totally fucking political. It's insanity. And a lot of this deals with LGBTQ because Putin in 2000 banned LGBTQ in his country. because he viewed it as a political movement, which is what it is. It's not a movement about LGBTQ rights, about being safe in the street or your right to get married. It's more of a Democrat, liberal, political, cultural sentiment and movement as opposed to any kind of like security movement for people who happen to enjoy having sex with same sex. The point is that America is the problem. It's not necessarily Russia or the KGB or the Kremlin. It's America's perspective on things, which is we want every. I saw a meme today. It was like when Kamala gets elected, every state will become California. Well, America has this problem that we want every fucking country throughout the world to be like America, and that's just not the world. That would be a one world government, and the world is just anti-American now. We've lost our cultural footing as the world leader on culture. We're now the gayest, most sick, infantilized, ridiculous culture on the planet. We're a media spectacle all day, every day.
I mean, you're talking about 10% of the population. We're talking about them like they're the majority and that they run everything.
Well,
But
it's
they have the
not.
loudest voice. They
Yeah.
have New York Times. They have Washington Post. They have the loudest voice, and they influence politics and mass media like no one
There
else.
was nothing that happened until that kid was taken out of a Texas bar and beaten within an inch of his life. And that's
Who,
what
Matthew
everybody
Pearl or
thinks
whatever his
about.
name was?
Excuse me.
Who, Matthew Pearl or whatever that guy, what was his name?
Yes.
Well, that's an event. I'm talking about the overall communication
It's
paradigm.
an event that galvanized the nation, and that gave them political power.
Well,
Texas.
well, I mean, see, the thing is, we talk about political power as if the Democrats. I'm just saying the cultural information that comes out of our media is the problem. I mean, Russia solved that by essentially taking over their media communication. But I'm not saying we need to do that. I'm just saying that we have a fine balance in this country. We're like a hyper media production. That's our greatest export to the world. It is our media. I'm just saying that um, if you talk to like anybody born, in the 40s, they will tell you that 1950s America was like paradise. They never smelled marijuana. They never saw cultural, insanity. But
There was marijuana, I could tell you.
in the 50s,
But it was really bad quality.
in the 50s, I don't know. I'm just saying that like that utopian vision is never coming back. But I'm just saying that America has to change. The State Department
Yes.
has to change. The
And
Army,
you said
the Air
something
Force.
that's also true, and it's sad that as I talk to young people around the world, they don't revere America. I mean, certainly people want to come here still and be free, but they talk much more. Where do you want to visit? I want to go to Canada. I want to go to other countries. But there's that. And for people under 25 or maybe under 30, they're not proud of America. There's a big divide. And even our own citizens in our youth, as they see how we stand in the country. So you're right.
I mean, could you
You
imagine?
see the reporter from CNN on Gobert, and when he asked her about Trump, did you see that?
I missed that. I usually listen to him. I've been working a lot.
He exposed himself, and everybody laughed at his, joke. I mean, the point is if Kamala becomes president and she takes us to a third world war because of her own incompetency, and there are drafts in this country, I will gladly lead hundreds of thousands of young men and women in their 20s into battle. I have no problem watching them die for the Democrat Party. But, I'm going to stay back. I'm not going to go join the fray and fight the Russians. I just find it comical that this could actually happen. If you look at Hinduism, and we're going back to the title, and you look at the Kali Yuga and the epochs or the eons of time and what a black woman represents in terms of mythology, Kamala Harris could be the apocalypse. And I know that sounds ridiculous but I'm tying it into Hinduism. But if she actually does wage an expansive war, which is most likely what's going to happen because the deep state is really sick, I mean, it's just profits. They don't look at it in terms of human devastation, um, and that it's just business as usual. And in many ways, that's true because if you study, Art of War, those types of documents, you understand that the political position of man actually is warfare. Everything can be analoged to war, 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 war. And it's a hard pill to swallow, but if you study history, you will realize that we have been engaged in war on this planet amongst ourselves ad infinitum, and it's not going away. But Kamala could be the most dangerous warrior princess the world has ever seen because she could be completely irrational and totally insane and let just whatever happens, let alone she'll be so disrespected overseas. I mean, it'll be the time if there are grievances out there, they like Trump said, I told Putin, don't even think about it. Don't even think about it. And that type of reverse psychology is what prevents an escalation of violence. Kamala may not have that ability to reverse psychologize and win by not fighting.
Maybe
Has the Democrat
heads prevail, but Adrian, President Trump spent an hour in the Kremlin with no American there, no translator, there's no record of what happened. No one in the world history has done that. What the fuck was that? Okay? I do not trust him, and I do not trust him with Putin.
You could be right. I mean,
He walked into North Korea,
did
across
you,
the border over to North Korea. He's just crazy like that, but I don't think he's compromised.
he could be compromised. He was very good friends with Jeffrey Epstein, and there's so many photos that I don't think that he's not compromised. I think that there's a very high probability he's compromised because that's what do you think a $30 billion budget at the CIA gets you per month? It gets you compromises. What do they do? I mean, with $30 billion a month, 360 billion a year in an annual budget, what the fuck do you really do with all that money? You compromise people. You reverse analyze people. You trick people. You deceive people. You manipulate people with that money. And, Trump he may be smart, but, if you're a man and you love pussy, it's all it takes.
Piece of the castle.
You don't have to be a drinker or a drug user. Pussy's the real drug. It bends steel.
That's where your LGBTQ and all the other letters. Maybe we need more of those. Just kidding.
Whatever's going to happen is going to happen. Nothing can change what's going to happen, meaning that the president is not necessarily the president. If there is a secret society in this country of what you could call skull and bonesmen or deep state operatives, they're going to do what the fuck they want to do. They don't care who the president is because what they're going to do is secret. And if they launch a thermonuclear weapon or detonate a dirty bomb and blame it on the Russians, and next thing you know, Kamala says, we can't let this fucking terrorism persist. The Russians are an evil regime. People will just accept it. Because, yeah.
We'll see. I mean, it's not her decision alone.
Well, like you said earlier, with the passage of the Patriot Act, she can declare war without congressional approval for what 30 days, and what we're already doing internationally. I mean, there's 20,000 plus U.S. contractors working in Ukraine, or even more, maybe hundreds of thousands at this point. But we're there, but we're just not there in official uniform.
Yep. It's happening in the field too. We've got aircraft carriers, Marines on there. We're there. We're on the water, but we're there.
I used to be in the Army, and I got to tell you, the entire training program is based on Russia. You study every Russian weapon system because they're the ones manufacturing them and exporting them to Africa, to the Middle East, etc. Like that movie with Nicolas Cage where he plays the arms smuggler. That's real. Like we may prosecute Russian arms smugglers, but we are doing the same thing. And it's business, but it's sick because Jesus, I mean, what has happened? If you look at Ukraine, it looks like World War II. I mean, but Gaza looks like World War II. I mean,
Yeah.
it's gone. Like,
And we're going to pay to rebuild it. We rebuilt Europe in the Marshall Plan.
I don't know. We live in a crazy. The world is just too insane to believe. It's like unfathomable. I think the U.S. State Department just accidentally sent $250 million to the Taliban through some kind of like aid program, and the Taliban captured the funds. So it's like, how the fuck are we going to leave $60 billion worth of weapons, and they're parading? They're doing national parades now with their weapon systems. They're getting 250 million.
Aid, we have sent enough aid to rebuild a city like Singapore to the Middle East, and very little bit gets to the people. I mean, they built 500 miles of tunnels, the same size as the New York subway system underneath there. There's Hamas living in Qatar and Dubai in luxury. So the people who need it are always the last to get it.
Yeah.
Yasser Arafat died with billions in the bank.
You know what's so funny is when you have so much money, you realize you actually can't even spend it. Because A, there's not enough things in the world to even buy, and B, to spend the money is difficult because it's like, well, how many Rolls Royces are you gonna house, and how many houses do you need? So
We had a cult in Oregon, I can't remember it, but they bought him 50 Rolls Royces.
yeah, I know that I've seen that documentary, and cults, are great fields, is a great topic to study because you realize there's political cults, there's religious cults, there's clown cults and troll cults, and it's any type of organizing, but it's all based off of communication. And you know, if all communication is hypnosis, what the DNC is putting on, they're actually doing a giant hypnosis show, and that's what RNC did, and that's what a comedian actually is. Is many people think comedians are funny people who tell great jokes or stories, but what they're actually doing when they go on stage is they're doing a very complicated hypnosis, and laughter or that catharsis, if it's self-deprecating, um, it's successful. Trump can be self-deprecating. Have you seen Kamala ever be self-deprecating? I haven't.
I haven't either, but I don't know her that well. I've enjoyed it. I'm going to get up early in the morning. I don't know if Dr. Jordan is here. I appreciate everyone's comments, and thank you again, Adrian.
Thanks, David. It's been fun. God bless.
I really appreciate your taking the time to educate us and speak your mind and speak very much information about when we're talking about biblical things and religion and, like I said, Stoicism. I appreciate that. The room almost ran itself.
God bless. Take care, Shiva. Good night, Dr. Jordan.
Nothing happened.
We fell asleep.
Conversation, and I need to retire, and I don't know about the other people here, but I really appreciate the opportunity, Jordan. Thank you. Yes, thank you. My apologies. Something came up, and I had to deal with it. Okay. Everything's good.
Take care. Good night, guys.